Well, hello and thank you for tuning into the channel. I get asked on so many occasions, what are the settings that I use to create the content on my channel? So you're in for a little bit of a treat today because I am going to give you not only the settings for the GoPro 7, but I'm going to give you those settings for the GoPro 8, fairly new to the market and I now own it. But let's just jump straight into the detail of the GoPro 7. So resolution types, there's two that I will flip between, and the first one is 4K and the second 2.7K. Any less than that, then you're not getting the best from the camera. And the only reason that I switch between these two resolutions is because 2.7K on a 64 gig memory card, which is what I use, will give me 2 hours of footage. And as soon as I switch to 4K, it will reduce that in half, so I'll get about an hour's worth of footage. And between the two, when you upload to YouTube, and by the time it's being compressed, you can hardly see any difference whatsoever. So I'd rather have more time recording on the trail over quality, especially uploading to YouTube. Frames per second is quite an important choice, and regardless of using the 4K or the 2.7K resolutions, I will set myself to 30 frames per second when going down the trail. I just find 24 loses the detail and it gives a false sense of speed. 60 I do use on occasion when I'm doing slow-mo stuff, and that's when I'm going to hand hold it and capture some action, so somebody doing a jump for instance. But actually the trail riding stuff I'll always keep selected at 30 FPS. Field of vision, it is very simple, this menu. If you want the best out of your camera when you're going down the trail, there is no other option than going super view. It is just amazing. It gives you the most immersive experience and viewing angles when going down the trail. But something else that I do jump into quite often, especially in 2.7K, is linear, and linear just provides me a reduction in fisheye effect so that when I'm doing an intro and an outro it looks so much more natural. You can see you've got a wide option there. I don't use that on any GoPro I've had, so I'll always jump in and out of super view and also linear. But just of note, the linear mode does not work in 4K resolutions on the GoPro 7. The low light option is not applicable. You can't even select it. The only time you can actually go into that, I'll just demonstrate, is when you're in any of those resolutions at 60 FPS. And what it actually does is when you're going down the trail, you can see that's now been selected to auto. When you go into a low lit area of woods, for instance, it will then reduce the frame rate to 30 FPS to try and get as much light into that sensor as possible and give you the best possible video quality. As soon as you go back out into that highly lit area again, it will then go up to 60 FPS. But because I use 30 FPS for going down my trails, it doesn't become an option, so it's going to stay at 30 anyway and give me the best possible footage into the trail. The stabilization I will leave at auto. Auto on a GoPro 7 means that Hypersmooth is on. There is a function to turn it off, but you're going to have some really bad choppy footage if you do that, so just leave it at auto. And make sure Pro Tune is selected to on, because it gives you a load more options that we're going to go through now to get the best possible footage. Shutter speed I leave at auto. I don't adjust that at all. And when it comes to the EV comp, you'll find that out of the box it will be set to 0. But I find that when you go to -1, it will darken that image just ever so slightly, and it makes it more manageable for post-production stuff so that you're not going to have an overexposed image, and it's easier to retain the details with a darker image and then brighten it, as opposed to completely overexposed, trying to reduce the exposure, but those details are already blown out. So -1 is a good balance. When we move into white balance, selected to auto. I don't adjust that at all. There are tutorials on YouTube that would tell you what settings to have depending on the conditions, but I find that auto white balance actually does quite a good job. When it comes to the minimum and maximum ISO values, minimum I always have set to 100 with the maximum at 1600. If you're to go a maximum any higher than that, you're going to have a lot of noise in the image, so I find that the camera handles 1600 really well. With sharpness set to medium, there are other options in there to have low or high. The reason I select medium is because I add a little bit of sharpness in DaVinci Resolve in the post-production side. But if you are not any good at that, or you just don't want to get involved in any post-production stuff, then high will do a fairly good job for you. When it comes to the color, for the first 18 months of my channel, I would always have that selected at GoPro color. And it actually does quite a good job, although it can at times oversaturate stuff and make it look very fake. So I decided to look at some color grading tutorials using the flat profile, and I just find that it retains a lot more information within those files out of the camera, and it gives you a lot more flexibility in post-production to get the realistic look of the trail that you were riding down. So when it comes to the raw audio, I always keep that off, so that's not even an option that I go into. But the mics is a different story. I have that selected to wind, and what it will try and do with the firmware that's in there and the software updates as time's gone on, it will try and reduce that wind noise that goes over the mics. I don't think it does a particularly good job still, but it's better than auto, which will mean that it switches between the different mics, and you can hear that obvious change in your audio file, and it sounds pretty hideous. So I use something called a wind slayer. I'll show you those at the end because I've got one for a GoPro 7 and 8, and that just covers the mics and gives me this almost perfect audio for the trails that I'm going down. So that is all the settings for the GoPro 7. Let's hit straight into the GoPro 8. So let's just jump straight into the GoPro 8, and you'll find that actually a lot of the settings just replicate what I've said, but there are a couple of additional menus on here that I'd like to share with you. But for the resolution, no change, so I'm either going to be in 4K or 2.7K at 30 FPS. I'll always be in super view. The difference with the GoPro 8 is you can select linear in 4K, which is fantastic. So for the intros and outros, I don't have to worry about changing from 4K to 2.7. So that's great straight out the box. And hyper smooth I will leave on. Now, without me going to all the different hyper smooth and boost and high settings, I just leave it at hyper smooth because it gives you the best immersive experience. And I do like to have a little bit of movement on the camera because not all trails are gimbal smooth, so I like it to look a bit more realistic than just this camera that is floating down the trail. Low light option is selected to off, and zoom doesn't even give you an option, but I would leave that as default anyway, with clips set to off. Now with the Pro Tune menu selected, here's an option that you don't get on the 7, and with the high bit rate selected to high, you will get a bigger file size. And in that file, it just retains a bit more detail, and actually it is noticeable, but by the time you upload to YouTube and it's been compressed again, it's marginal, the difference between the low and high anyway. But to get the best possible image out of the camera, I keep that at high, with the shutter at auto and the EV comp at -1. White balance, set the same as before to auto, with the ISO minimum and maximum values set to 1600, and for the same reason, if you go above 1600, you are going to lose some of that image quality because it will be noisy due to the ISO being too high. Sharpness set to medium because, again, on the GoPro 8, I'll add some sharpness. And when it comes to the color, what you'll find with the GoPro 8 is the saturation is so much better on this one. So out of the camera, the footage actually looks very good. But because I'm quite used to color grading my own footage now, I just keep that at flat. And I'll do that post-production with the raw audio set to off. And the wind, although the firmware is supposed to be better on the 8, I found it to be quite lame, so I'm just waiting for some further updates. But I've got a wind slayer or a windsock for this also, and that does a pretty good job at covering up those mics and preventing the wind from penetrating, giving you that horrid audio file. When you come out of wind reduction, there are a couple of additional settings there, and they're just shortcuts to where you want things set up on the main GoPro screen. I've left those as default, so just have a play with those. You might find there's an area that would suit a menu more than where it's set, so that's entirely up to you. But it's a very quick overview of the 8 because most of it replicates the 7. So here's the wind slayer for the GoPro 7. It's not the most attractive thing, and you can pick them up for about £2 or £3, so I'll leave a link in the description, but it covers up all those microphone ports and it does a really good job. And if you check out the videos on my channel, you'll get to hear exactly how that audio is. And for the GoPro 8, they have one as well. It's a little bit more expensive and it seems a bit more premium actually, so I'll link that in the description also. But this covers up the microphone ports exactly in the same way that the 7 does, and just provides me amazing audio for the sports that I'm doing. Well, that's it. I hope you've enjoyed what you've seen there for the GoPro 7 settings and the GoPro 8 settings. I haven't included any sample footage, but if you look at the end screen, you'll see that I did some test footage as I got the GoPro 8 in particular, and that kind of replicates what the 7 performance is. They are effectively the same with a couple of subtle differences, but actually the video quality overall is very much identical. So if you like what you've seen, give it a thumbs up. throw your comments in down below, and what would be even better is if you subscribe, so click on the logo down the bottom right, and until then I'll see you for the next one.